In a shady corner of Los Angeles, Victoria and her husband David lived in an old Victorian house. Victoria desired a quiet and tranquil life, and this house seemed like the ideal place for her. That is, until they see their next-door neighbor, Mr. Thornhill. Mr. Thornhill was a tall, thin, and pale man. His eyes always seemed to be hidden in the darkness, and he had a strange expression on his face. Victoria began to feel uneasy from the moment she first saw him. One night, while Victoria was sitting in the backyard of the house, she heard a strange noise coming from Mr. Thornhill's window. It was as if a knife was scraping against a wooden floor. With a feeling mixed with curiosity and fear, she decided to investigate the source of the sound. She slowly approached Mr. Thornhill's house and looked in his window. She was horrified by what she saw. Mr. Thornhill was standing over a body lying on the ground. He had a bloody knife in his hand. Victoria screamed and ran back. When he reached the door of his house, he heard footsteps behind him. When she turned around, she saw Mr. Thornhill running towards her with a knife in his hand. With one last move, Victoria opened the door of the house and entered. She locked the door and called the police. When police arrived at the scene, they searched Mr. Thornhill's home, but they couldn't find the body. Mr. Thornhill had disappeared. Victoria couldn't believe what she saw. Where had Mr. Thornhill hidden the body? How did he disappear? These questions continued to trouble his mind. A few days later, Victoria found a package in front of her house. Inside the package was a letter from Mr. Thornhill. In the letter, he wrote that Victoria had seen him and knew everything. He also made a threat to Victoria to keep her quiet. Victoria didn't know what to do out of fear. She thought about going to the police again, but she was afraid of Mr. Thornhill's threat. What if he told the police everything, and they couldn't find him? What if Mr. Thornhill comes back for revenge? Victoria decided to remain silent, but this turned into a nightmare for him. She felt that Mr. Thornhill was watching her at all times. She saw him in every shadow, in every sound. Victoria's life turned into hell. He couldn't sleep or eat. She could no longer distinguish between what was real and what was a dream. One day, while Victoria was sitting in the backyard of the house, she saw Mr. Thornhill. She appeared before his eyes as if made of air. Mr. Thornhill approached him and said, "I told you, you would keep quiet." Victoria screamed and fainted. When she woke up, she was in the hospital. Doctors told him he was suffering from a nervous breakdown. Victoria tried to tell them that she had seen Mr. Thornhill, but no one believed him. Victoria lived the rest of her life in Mr. Thornhill's shadow. He never saw her again, but she always felt it. One day, while reading an old newspaper, Victoria learned that Mr. Thornhill had been imprisoned years ago for a murder and had recently been released from prison. Victoria understood everything at that moment. Mr. Thornhill had found him after he was released from prison and decided to scare him. Victoria breathed a sigh of relief. She was now free from Mr. Thornhill's shadow. Or is it? One night, while Victoria was sleeping at home, she was woken up by that familiar voice again. "I told you, Victoria. You'll never get away." When Victoria turned around, Mr. Thornhill was standing next to her bed. He had a bloody knife in his hand.